Where's Dr. K? Dr. K is right here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. It's been such a long time since I've seen y'all. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is just for educational and entertainment purposes only. So if y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. Welcome, everyone. So we're going to talk about some cool stuff. So I don't know if y'all caught this, but we streamed yesterday evening, which was actually a lot of fun. It was a little bit more chill, a little more intimate. And 2 streams in one day. Yeah, for depending on your time zone, this is going to be the second stream of the day, I suppose. I slept between the last stream and this stream. But we've got a lot of different stuff compared to yesterday that we're going to cover today, and I'm actually super excited about it. So we'll dive in shortly, but yeah, so couple of things to talk about. I was distracted by chat. Oh my God. Some of the stuff that y'all say. Someone's like, Dr. K is the Jesus of the 21st century. I certainly hope not. That's terrifying. So we've got some cool stuff. So, okay, so this, we're going to try to be helpful. Okay, today we're going to try to be helpful. But we're going to talk about dreams today. We're going to talk about daydreams. We're also going to talk about straight up dreams. So like, this is something that we've touched on a lot. It's kind of like a meme topic, to be honest, because the truth of the matter about dreams is that there are a lot of different opinions on them. And no one really knows really what's going on with dreams. So what we're going to share with y'all are a couple of different perspectives on like, what's the deal with dreams? So I'm going to share with y'all my sort of like understanding of dreams and how I think about dreams. As a clinician, sometimes I'll do some amount of dream analysis. So we'll talk a little bit about dreams and their usage in psychotherapy and stuff like that. But we're going to sort of go over a little bit of neuroscience, go over a little bit of like, okay, let's just try to figure out like, what are dreams and why do we have them? And then, we'll talk a little bit about sort of their use in the therapeutic space. It's not something that I do regularly with clients or patients, but on occasion it can actually be really useful. So we're just going to like have a conversation about dreams. Okay. And this is the sort of thing where it's like, I can share my opinion on it, but this is definitely one of those topics where like, I'm not an expert. Right. So I've studied them a lot. I've tried to figure this out for many, many, many years. I have particular theories, but I'm not an expert. And secondly, like, I'm certainly not right. Right. So this is where even people who feel really strongly about being experts in dreams, I don't know that they're right, because I don't know that we as the human race have really figured out what dreams are. So we're going to talk about dreams, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about daydreaming, and we're going to talk a little bit about some more practical stuff around ADHD and sort of like if you fall into this problem of sort of like getting distracted and leaving like 1,000 tasks undone, right? So you start one task, you move to the next, you move to the next, you get bored, move to the next. How you can sort of manage that. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about relationships for Can of 13, who can't stop daydreaming about their crush because she is so cute. Well, I hope that ends well for you, but, did I lose weight? Possibly. I've been sick. So I was like sick for a week, so I probably lost a little bit of weight. I've also been eating healthier. So is it sickness? Is it eating healthy? Who knows? Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about daydreaming. Yeah, so it seems like this could strike a chord. So what do y'all want to start with? Can we get a poll? Our 3 topics, let's take a look, are, it's like I'm caught in a cycle of interest, distraction / boredom, forgetfulness, remembering, and repeating until I have endless, unfinished, and forgotten things. So this sort of like endless distraction with ADHD. My girlfriend keeps on giving me crap for cheating on her in her dreams. All right. So like, we're going to talk a little bit about dreams and like what's going on with dreams. And then that last topic that we can cover today is I keep rewarding my brain by daydreaming about my end goal without actually working towards it. So like sometimes what'll happen is we want to do something and then we'll daydream about it and then we won't actually do it. So let's see what people want to talk about. Okay. So it looks like most people want to start with dreams or daydreaming. Oh my God, it's close. It's tight, chat. Okay, daydreaming about goals is where we're starting. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about daydreaming and how daydreaming can actually get in the way of our goals. I keep rewarding my brain by daydreaming about my end goal without actually working towards it. I have this issue where I keep relying on external motivation as fuel to propel me forward. Fantasies of grandiosity where I'm infinitely better than the person who rejected me romantically and making them realize what they lost, or proving my worth to people who took me for granted. Righteous justice. I know this sounds like covert narcissism. Not so covert. I might as well be one, non-diagnosed. I wouldn't jump that far. So we all have, ego defense mechanisms. So that's just a normal part of the human mind. I think what's fundamentally flawed within my mind is the belief that no one could ever love or appreciate me if I'm not interesting enough. The general advice is to just focus on self-improvement, and somehow that's going to meet all of my emotional needs. I tried to set deadlines for my goals, but sadly now I feel only anxious because I'm not putting in the work, and as a result, I return to escapist behavior, which includes daydreaming. At the end, I find myself stuck in a loop where I have a goal in mind. I work on my goal for one day. It starts to feel overwhelming because I'm super depressed and no one wants to give me attention. I revert back to escapism and fantasize about the life I'll never have due to my laziness. Then I resent myself for not putting in effort and compare myself to other people's achievement, which acts like a catalyst and motivates me for another day or two. I know Dr. K has talked about daydreaming. I'm aware of it now, but I have yet to find a solution to my problem. How do I stop worrying too much about how uninteresting I come across and just focus on my hobbies that I once enjoyed regardless of the outcome? So this is kind of a really good post because this is a case of someone who's done some of the work, right? So most of us, when we struggle with a problem, we're not starting from zero. We sort of recognize a couple of things. We recognize, for example, that daydreaming is maladaptive. We recognize that there are certain techniques we can use, for example, like set goals for yourself and sort of focus on those goals. We also have learned as a community to introspect some, right? So this person has also done some introspective work and realized, I have this like fundamental flaw within my mind that no one will appreciate me or love me unless I'm interested enough. So we've started to do some work as a community, which is awesome. At the same time, this can be like really challenging because learning some of these nuggets doesn't fix your problem, right? So like this is the basic problem with like daydreaming, which is that, okay, I feel bad about myself. I daydream in some sort of grandiose way. That sort of makes me feel like righteous and good, right? Like it makes me feel like emotionally good. The problem is that like then I don't actually change my life because I'm stuck in this dream. And then like time goes by and then a day has gone by and I haven't actually moved forward. And then I start beating myself up, right? I start to feel resentful for myself. Instead of actually doing anything about my problems, I'm just dreaming about fixing my problems. And sometimes that resentment, some kind of negative emotion can even spur some kind of action, right? So for a day or two, I get so frustrated with myself that I channel that frustration. I use it as fuel to propel me forward for a day or two and I work. I'm tired of this. Never again. But then that emotion fizzles and my motivation fizzles with it. And then I feel bad about myself. And then I daydream and then the cycle repeats. So how do we break out of this? Okay? Like this is what we have to figure out. So what we're going to do is sort of give y'all 3 very concrete steps about how to break out of this cycle of daydreaming, setting a goal, sort of moving towards the goal, sort of getting frustrated with yourself about moving towards the goal, not being enough, scrapping the goal, being resentful, beating yourself up. Like, how do we break out of this cycle? So we're going to tackle this in 3 different ways. And the key thing is that the third thing that we're going to talk about, I think, is something that's grossly misunderstood, missed. So a lot of us have awareness that, okay, there's like some kind of negative emotion here. I need to deal with the negative emotion. I've yet to find a solution. How do I stop worrying about how to become uninteresting, right? So we'll sort of figure out, okay, how do I stop worrying so much? And how do I just act? How do I focus on my hobbies regardless of the outcome? We know that we need to do those things, but we don't really know how. And it turns out that we tend to miss one really crucial step of this process, oftentimes. Okay, so let's try to understand the cycle and the process that goes with it. Okay, so first thing to consider. Let's start by understanding kind of scientifically the cycle of the daydream. So I feel bad about myself. I have negative emotion. And then I daydream. And what happens to my emotional state after I daydream? It becomes positive emotion. Right? Because now it's like grandiose. I feel good about myself. There I am, kind of like laying in bed at night, grinning to myself. Oh, I'll show them one day. You know, all these people, I'll realize this. Okay? So it's kind of interesting. The first thing to understand is that daydreaming is actually like a coping mechanism. It's an emotional coping mechanism. So the tricky thing here is that when we want to stop worrying too much, our brain is like, oh, your goal is to stop worrying too much? Fantastic. I have an awesome option for you. So let's say I have some kind of negative emotion and I'm unsatisfied with myself. Let's say I'm unsatisfied with my physical appearance. Okay, so there's negative emotion here. I've got 2 options. I can do a lot of hard work. Okay, and then I'm going to add a caveat here. And then maybe at the end of the hard work, I'll feel good about myself. Okay, or what I can do is daydream. And then what I can do is feel good about myself right now. So our brain has a choice. There are 2 roads to positive emotion. One is daydreaming and one is doing something about it, right? But which one's easier? Which one's more efficient? It's like, kind of think about it this way. I mean, like, you know, if you want to get water, you don't walk a mile to your friend's house to get a glass of water. You go to your kitchen or your sink or whatever, and you get water from there. Your brain automatically takes the easiest path. Now, there's another really important point to consider here, which is that there's an assumption that hard work will lead to positive emotion and progress and feeling good about myself. But if we actually look at this scenario, I work on my goal for one day and it starts to feel overwhelming. Okay, interesting. So when you work towards your goal, you feel overwhelmed. I resent myself for not putting enough effort, which acts like a catalyst and motivates me for a day or two. So now if we're scientific about it, what does hard work actually do? If I work for one day, if I do work for one day, how do I feel at the end of it? I feel overwhelmed. This is what we assume happens. But if we actually look at our experience, these are the choices that we have. And our brain is like, you can work for a day, get nothing accomplished, feel overwhelmed, and feel negative emotion, feel resentment. And then that, in turn, is going to go over here and reinforce this. So which path do you think your brain is going to take? It's going to take this path. Easy, right? Because if we actually if we use experimental data instead of our mind, what we'll observe is that even working towards our goals can sometimes create negative emotion. And then we get confused, like, oh my God, why am I daydreaming all the time? It's this simple, right? Just look at yourself and you'll find this cycle. So couple of other things about daydreaming. Second thing to understand. So here I am in the present, and I'm feeling bad about myself. And when I daydream, I go to the future. Future time, 1 year in the future. And here I am happy, I am triumphant, and I feel good about myself. And so the interesting thing is, so this person did the right thing. They're like, okay, so if I want to get from here to here, what I have to do is set a goal. So let me set a goal, right? Let me work towards my goals. So I'm over here, and as I'm working towards my goals, what tends to happen? Now, if my goal is based on a fantasy, if it's based on a daydream, that goal is very, very, very far away. And if the goal is very, very, very far away, 1 day of effort is just right here. It doesn't substantially move me towards my goal, right? So there's something else kind of interesting happens. We touched on this yesterday, and we've talked about it before. But if my goal is up here and I'm over here, and this is how far I move, the gap is huge. There's very little positive reinforcement for my brain, right? So this is why people say, like, you know, have goals that are kind of like bite-sized. You want to sort of reduce the size of your goals. This is really important to understand, because if we're basing our goals based on daydreams, those are going to be pretty unrealistic goals and are going to set us up for a lack of positive reinforcement, even when we make progress. Because, like, look at this for a second. I work on my goal for a day and it starts to feel overwhelming. Like, what? Like, how are we going to reinforce this kind of behavior? Like, how are we going to work for 2 days if working on my goal for 1 day is overwhelming? So what's kind of interesting is, like, setting a goal that you can accomplish in 1 day. Then there's no progress. There's no need to be overwhelmed because you're done. Right? That's it. So how do we tackle this problem? Now that we've sort of figured out, we have 2 basic problems. The first is that daydreaming is an emotional coping mechanism. And daydreaming also anchors us in the future. So this is kind of interesting, but if we want to break out of this cycle, once we understand the pathophysiology of it, if we understand what daydreaming is, how it works, our answer actually becomes somewhat clear. The first is that this is the wrong goal. Because if your goal is to stop worrying, then daydreaming is the answer. Instead, what we need to do, number 1, is be able to tolerate negative emotion. Very, very important, right? So develop some kind of alternate coping mechanism. So instead of, I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but like sometimes in life, we're buffeted by our negative emotions. And our negative emotions control our behaviors. They create avoidance. We don't want to feel those negative emotions, so we start avoiding all kinds of things. And so as long as we set our goal is stop worrying or no longer feel anxious or like the elimination of negative emotion, we lose control of our lives. Just surrender control entirely to the negative emotion. Because then what happens is if that's the goal, is no more negative emotion, the only things that you can do are the things that move you away from negative emotion. And this is how you get stuck in the trap of daydreaming. So this is kind of interesting, but it's sort of like even this person's like negative emotions sometimes motivate them in the right way. So this is important to understand. Why do human beings experience negative emotions? It's because they're actually very powerful motivators. They tend to be the strongest and easiest motivators, but they're kind of like dirty motivators. They're like burning unclean fuel. Okay? So instead of trying to fix your negative emotion, sit with it, right? So we've taught a lot of meditation. Like that's a very good example of, tolerating negative emotion. So when you feel some kind of negative emotion, I'm not saying, so if you're listening to this, you're like, but like there's too much of it, right? But then how do I fix all my problems? These are all the things that your mind will start. Like, what do you mean tolerate negative emotion? Like that's not going to make my dreams come true. Like tolerate it until when? When does it end? What, I'm just supposed to sit and wallow in my negative emotion forever? No, that's your mind not knowing what's going to happen when you learn to tolerate negative emotion. Like you just don't know how to do that, right? So it's so intolerable. You start daydreaming to get rid of it. You start playing video games to get rid of it. You get high to get rid of it. And so you don't know how to tolerate it because it feels so intolerable. So that's where like you sit for like 15, 20 minutes, you meditate for a little while, and what you'll tend to find is that the negative emotion will go away. It may be triggered again by something else, but just learning to be non-reactive to your negative emotions for at least a brief period of time, for 1 hour a day, for 2 hours a day, will be very, very revolutionary for your life. Then you're like, how does it fix my problems? Well, we've sort of explored how all of your problems start with this. So if this stops becoming a problem, right, then like this becomes easier. If we kind of like get overwhelmed and we don't let that feeling of overwhelmedness stop us from acting, then we can continue to act. And it's pretty cool. Okay? So number one is like learn to tolerate your negative emotions. You can do that through meditation. We'll give you a couple of other tips here. Second thing that's very important to do is adopt a present focus. So remember, goals are in the future. And if I have a goal that I've set up for myself that's a year from now or 2 years from now, if I've got, let's say, 800 days to get in shape, what difference does it make if I don't exercise today? Not much, right? Oh, I've still got 799 days to get in shape. How long does it take to get in shape? I don't know, maybe 6 months, 8 months. So, I mean, I could go down to 400 days without making a single step towards my goal, and I've still got plenty of time. So goals are things of the future, generally, right? And so what you really need to do is don't focus on this step, this phase of your life. Focus on this phase of your life. What can I do today? And just focus on that. And this is where you've got to be careful because all kinds of negative emotions will come up if you start focusing on the present. You'll be like, it won't be enough. But what if? All kinds of thoughts. What's the point? What's the point of practicing piano for 1 day? What's cool is playing piano and busting it out and impressing everyone. You see how your mind automatically goes to that fantasy? Because once you start living in the present, once you start moving into a present focus, you're depriving of your mind of the ability to daydream. And then your mind gets terrified and it's going to fight you and it's going to make you feel bad. Because if it makes you feel bad, what does it get to do? You're taking away your mind's crack, and it ain't going to like it. And it's going to try to punish you for it. So that's where you're going to breathe, you're going to meditate, you're going to focus on what you can do today. And so that's sort of where, like, if you want to learn how to focus on the present, the key thing to understand is that your mind is going to tell you all kinds of stuff like it's not enough. But that's okay. It doesn't need to be enough. I'm just going to focus on what I'm going to do today, and like that's my goal, and I'm sticking to it. If it's not enough, that's okay. And then your mind is like, no, but it's not okay because I want all these things. I want these people to love me and I want all those things. And that's where you pause for a moment, you talk to your mind and you kind of say, I understand that you want those things. I hope that we'll get them. All that stuff is fine. For the other 10 hours of today, we can worry about that stuff. But for the next 2 hours, for this 2 hours, we're not going to worry about that. I'm going to exercise for 45 minutes. I'm going to read for 45 minutes and I'm going to clean for 30 minutes. The rest of the next 10 hours, I can worry about how it's not going to be enough. I can panic for 10 hours. I don't need to panic for 12 hours a day. 10 hours of a day is sufficient. So adopt a present focus. And in terms of goals, just focus on things that you can accomplish today. And not even today, focus on things that you can accomplish within 15 minutes, in 30 minutes. I'm going to do 1 Pomodoro of studying. So be very, very present focused. So this is important because I don't know if like this kind of makes sense, but I've worked with, so back when I was doing primarily clinical work, I was mostly an addiction psychiatrist. And so I'd have patients who would come in and people who wanted to get sober. 2 kinds of people who want to get sober. People who want to be sober for a year and people who want to be sober for a day. My goal is to be 1 year clean. And generally speaking, what I found is that people who focused on being sober today were much more successful than people who were trying to be sober for 1 year. Because you can't be sober for a year. It's literally impossible. There's nothing you can do to be sober for a year. Being sober for a year is an emergent property. It is not something that is actually created. It is something that is built up over time and that you can't actually do. All you can do is be sober right now. All you can do is not take that drink in this moment. That's really all you can do. And in the next moment, you cannot take the next drink. And in the next moment, you cannot take the next drink. But literally the only thing that exists is the present. And so once people realize, and then it's the ones who are like, okay, yay, I did it. I'm sober for a year. I accomplished my goal. And what do you think happens over the next month? They relapse. Because they did it, right? The battle is over. We won. Easy. We're going to hang up our weapons. We're going to chill. We're going to take off our armor. We succeeded. Whereas the person who recognizes that this is a battle that I'll have to fight every single day is the one that actually wins. So what is this? This is a present focus. And we need to adopt this, especially for unhealthy coping mechanisms like daydreaming. Number 3. So this is the thing that people miss. So as we look at this diagram, what we see is that we're reinforcing all the wrong behavior. This positive emotion that we experience actually reinforces the daydreaming. The hard work that we actually do makes us feel overwhelmed and creates sort of like a punishment, actually. It's not negative reinforcement, it's punishment, according to the terms of classical conditioning. Because if we work hard, what do? We feel overwhelmed. And if we daydream, what do? We feel good. So one of these leads to a punishment and one of them leads to a reinforcement. So the other problem with this whole cycle is that we're reinforcing the wrong things. We have an altered reinforcement. And let's go back to the case. So at the end of the day, stuck in a loop where I have a goal in mind, work on the goal for 1 day, it starts to feel overwhelming. Right? Acts like a catalyst which motivates me for a day or two. So all the wrong stuff is being reinforced here. So there's one thing that we need to start doing, which is how to sort of build on our successes. So all of these problems that people have, we always focus on fixing the negative. We want to take away the negative. We want to stop worrying. How do I do this? How do I do this? We're always focused on avoiding the pain, removing the negative, and like fixing the problem. What we don't ever do is positive reinforcement or reinforce the positive. So I'll give you just an example. At the end of that one day of work that you've done, what do you do cognitively before you go to bed? Do you feel good about yourself? Do you even bother to reflect on the day? Can you take a step back and say, hey, good job. I know it feels like I haven't gone far enough, but at least today was a win. Maybe I need to duplicate today, but like I can actually like be proud of what I accomplished today. Do you guys get any sense of any kind of positive reflection in any of this post? All I see here is self-loathing, right? I think what's fundamentally flawed within my mind is the belief that no one could ever love or appreciate me because if I'm not interesting enough. No, what's flawed in your mind is that you don't think you're interesting enough. So then what you have to do is come up with like all these hobbies that you're good at to impress people because intrinsically you don't see the worth. And you can see it like the way that this person beats themselves up with every sentence. Y'all see that? And there's no positive reinforcement. There's no appreciation, which acts as a catalyst and motivates me for another day or two. This is not a success in this person's mind. I work on my goal for one day. That's not a success. That's a failure. And when progress becomes a failure in our mind, that's when we're truly screwed. So what we've got to do is spend some time reflecting on the positive. At least acknowledge our wins, no matter how small they will be. Because right now, we're recording our wins in the L column. Work for a day. Is that a win or a loss? It's a loss because I only worked for one day. I got motivated. I worked for 1 to 2 days. Is that a win or a loss? That's a loss because I only worked for 1 or 2 days. Well, what would a win be? Well, if I worked for 365 days in a row, that would be a win. Y'all see this? So this is something that people don't do often enough. It's completely absent. How do I stop daydreaming? Well, there are days that you stop daydreaming, right? There are days that one day that you get something done, a couple of days that you feel motivated. So you can acknowledge all that negative stuff, but at least spend a few moments to reinforce the positive. At the end of the day, say, hey, I don't know if this is going to be enough. Who knows what frame of mind I'll wake up in tomorrow? But at least today, I can be proud of what I did. And notice how your mind is like, what on earth? Like, will rebel against that thought. No, 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 no. What do you mean? How can you be proud of not accomplishing anything? You didn't accomplish anything. Your goal isn't met. You haven't achieved the fantasies that I've created for you. And then this person wonders that I once enjoyed regardless of the outcome. That is how you do it regardless of the outcome. Do you see that? Like literally you train your mind and your mind says that's not enough. And you say, okay, who cares? I don't care. I did a good job today. There's something I can be proud of today. So this is the key thing. So oftentimes we get stuck in this cycle of like burst of motivation followed by like period of wallowing in our despair. And the problem is that even when we have the burst of motivation, we don't reinforce that in any way, shape, or form. All we think about is how do I get rid of the despair? How do I get rid of the despair? How do I get rid of the despair? Part of getting rid of the despair is acknowledging when you do have some win, no matter how small, and say, you know what? Good job, bro. Good job, girl. You did it. It's not enough. That's okay. It may not be enough, but like at least today I can be proud of what I accomplished. And then your mind is like, but you didn't accomplish anything. Even if I didn't accomplish anything, I still moved forward towards my goal. I did not spend the whole day daydreaming. That's a win. I did not spend a whole day playing a video game or binging Stranger Things on Netflix or whatever. There's something I can be proud of today. And watch your mind as it rebels against that thought. And as you do this especially, your life will start to change. Because these kinds of things, like this is built up in a moment. Like it's like moments in your mind of war. Subtle, subtle war. Where your mind tries to convince you. And you have to start winning those battles. moment by moment by moment by moment by moment. So it's a very common problem that people will daydream too much. And then you think about, you build all these goals for yourself and you don't actually move towards the goals. Instead, what you do is you think about the goals. And then we get stuck in this cycle of like, daydreaming about this goal, not moving towards the goal, feeling resentful towards ourselves. As we become resentful, we'll get like this burst of angry motivation that wears off in a day or two. And then we're kind of stuck back on square one. And then like the cycle repeats. So what do you do about this? First thing is to understand the nature of daydreaming. To understand that negative emotions are hard to tolerate. And one way that we cope with them is we daydream. Because when I'm feeling bad about myself and I think about how awesome the future is going to be in my dreams, I start to feel good about myself. Yay. Second thing to understand about daydreaming is that it takes us to the future, right? That's the whole point, is we're not stuck in this horrible present where we're not doing anything and not accomplish anything, where people don't value us and things like that. So like we love to be in the future because the present sucks. And the future is a beautiful place that I can construct with my mind, and I can make it whatever I want because it's a fantasy. How do you break out of this problem? First thing is like stop running away from the negative. Learn to tolerate your negative emotion. What do you mean by tolerate it? That just means don't give in to whatever the default action of your negative emotion is for some period of time. Half an hour. An hour. So I recently started doing this thing just to practice what I preach, and I've stopped taking my phone into the bathroom. No more phones in the bathroom. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do for those 5 minutes that I'm using the restroom, or even 60 seconds that I'm using the restroom? What am I going to do? Oh my God. And you survive it. It's like not that bad. Right? The other thing is when I take my phone in the bathroom, I'm there for like 15 minutes. I don't need to be there for 15 minutes. So learn to tolerate negative emotion. Second thing is start living in the present. Focus on the present. Focus on today. Third thing, this is the thing that people miss the most, is actually like acknowledge your positives at the end of the day. Reinforce that. Say, hey, like this is actually something like I may not have moved a significant amount towards my goal, because your mind is going to tell you all this kind of crap. But at least I did something. I didn't waste the whole day daydreaming. So if I've got a choice, right? This is what you tell your mind. It's like I've got a choice. I can spend the day learning to practice piano, and I may never learn how to play it. It may never be enough. Or I can spend the day daydreaming about practicing piano and becoming an awesome piano player. Which one do I want to pick? I want to pick actually spending a day practicing the piano. And that's what I actually did today. So I lived my life today aligned with the person that I want to be. Even if it doesn't work, at least I can take pride in that. Sounds completely foreign. You got to start practicing it. Question. Okay, this is a great question. So Leafy Terry is saying, I like the idea of celebrating small wins, but what if I don't push myself ever? I just get comfortable with celebrating small things. Am I still fighting incremental progress? You see that? Y'all see that question? It's like, no, but what if it doesn't work? So is Leafy Terry's question a future-oriented question or a present-oriented question? Right? This is a fancy way of the mind saying, but what if it isn't enough? It's not going to be enough. What if I just content myself with small wins and then I'm just happy with the small things in life? Oh my God. What starts happening if I find joy in what I'm doing day to day and I'm comfortable with celebrating small wins? What does that mean for my life? Right? Like, it's like, that's the point. That's when you've won the game of life. That's when you'll be happy. But wait, no, I'm confused. I thought happiness was something over there, far, far away. No, like, happiness is like, man, this water is really great. When you can enjoy that and start, I swear, if you spend a lot of time looking at the nature of happiness, what you'll discover, it's kind of bizarre. The only thing that exists is the present moment. The only time that you can feel happiness is in the present. Like, I've had big accomplishments in my life, and I've had small accomplishments in my life. So in medical school, it's going to sound so bad. In medical school, we have this thing called match day. So I went to Tufts University School of Medicine. And so on match day, you figure out where you're going for residency. And residency is where you really learn to be a doctor. So medical school, you're in the classroom for 2 years, and then you sample different things. So you do like a month of, psychiatry, you do a couple months of surgery, deliver a couple of babies, and you try to see what you like. But in medical school, for example, I did 2 months of psychiatry training. In residency, you do 4 years of psychiatry training. So on match day, everyone goes to the school. You get the sealed envelope. And everyone opens the envelope at the same time, and you figure out where you match. So where are you going to train? Where am I going to train to become a psychiatrist? And so I matched at the number one place on my rank list. So I had ranked number one at Mass General Hospital, McLean Hospital, which is a Harvard Medical School residency, the number one and number two psychiatric hospitals in the USA. And so I was like, cool, great. Let me tell you all what. A couple days ago, I played this game of Dota where I went safe lane with a Medusa. My Medusa was level 2 at 7 minutes and fed 3 kills in lane and was like jungling and got booted out of the jungle. My team got a little bit frustrated. Our position 4, if y'all don't know Dota, you're not going to get the rest of the story, but too bad. Our position 4 silencer was like, this Medusa can't carry the game. I guess I'm going to go carry build. And we started playing together. And we were like, okay, this Medusa, we don't know if they don't speak English or like they're muted or they're AFK or what, but like, we're going to play this game. And we played this game. We swung it back. Medusa free farm for like half an hour while we were dumpstering all over the other team. And we won. With a level 2 carry at 7 minutes. Man, the joy I felt in that moment was greater than the joy on match day. Maybe the same. Who knows? I was pretty chill about match day. Because I was lucky enough to where I was pretty confident that I was going to end up at any place. All the places that I interviewed at, I would have been happy to go to. So like if I wound up at UCLA or whatever, like that would have been hype, right? It's like moving to California, let's go. My wife really wanted to be in New York at Columbia. And so if I ended up there, that would have been great. If I wound up at Stanford, like that would have been cool. Like, I guess we're going to the Bay Area, like sweet, right? Like all good options. And so the thing to understand is that happiness is just in the present. You can't be happy over a grand period of time. You can just be happy now. Now, the interesting thing is that even the happiness of today can be born out of the past. So when I think about being a parent, for example, and I have memories of joy of being a parent of like when my kid was 1 year old, right? But that's happiness that I still feel in the present moment. So it's like, it's kind of bizarre, but a lot of what our mind tells us about life just isn't true. And a lot of like, if you really want to enjoy life, like really enjoy the present. Now that doesn't mean a life of hedonism. A lot of people think that means hedonism. No, because hedonism is sort of enjoyment, but it's not really happiness. Like, I don't know if y'all have ever had a messy kitchen and then you clean it for a while and then it's clean. And the feeling of satisfaction you get after cleaning your kitchen can be quite profound. You know, I don't know if y'all have ever like cooked. So the other day I slow cooked something for 3 hours. So I did a bunch of work. Like I worked in the kitchen for an hour and stuck something in the oven, and then I kind of was like done, right? So like my kids were out doing something with my wife, and so I was like, okay, like time to play a game of Dota. So I sat down and I played a game of Dota. And then played another game, and then it was supposed to cook for 3 hours, so it was done 2 hours later. And it's like, turned off the Dota, okay, the food is ready. It was a delicious meal. And so like just try to live your life on a day-to-day basis and be happy with what you've done today. That's the key thing. So at the end of the day, can you be happy with how you spent your day? Because if you live a life of hedonism, the answer to that question is going to be no. But if you live your life with some enjoyment and some work, it's like, I can feel good about today because you know what? I did some gardening, watered the plants, took care of this, finally cleaned that crap out, ate some good food, spent some quality time with my family, and played some video games. And like, that's a happy life. Does that make sense? Carrot mold with the 5-head play. If your kitchen is clean, you can't get the satisfaction from cleaning it. Correct. But you know what you can get satisfaction from? You can get satisfaction from 2 other things. One is not having to clean it, which is huge. Second thing is being able to cook in a clean kitchen, which is amazing. Cooking in a dirty kitchen feels like crap. You'll get that? And then you have something else to clean. So Banjo B is saying can't cook anyway. I guarantee you, Banjo B, actually, I don't know exactly where you are. I mean, if you're like streaming this, you know, in the desert somewhere, then maybe this won't work. But if you've got access to a kitchen, you can learn how to cook something today. 100%. 100%. Take some tomato, chop that up, grab some basil. If you don't have some basil, you can get some basil, or you can get a basil plant. Chop some of that up. Grab a little bit of oil. Take a sprinkle of sugar, a sprinkle of salt, sprinkle of balsamic vinegar. Maybe slice yourself some fresh mozzarella cheese. Make yourself a tomato basil salad. That stuff is hype. Tastes delicious. Italian restaurants will charge you like $12 for that. And you can make it at home for like $3. Like, it's so good. It tastes so good. And it's so easy to make. It takes less than 5 minutes to make. And it is delicious. Like, okay. I'll give you all another one of my favorites. So I make this thing that I call a gamer grilled cheese, which is not really a grilled cheese. So what I do is I take a piece of bread, slap some cheese on there. Now, here's the other thing. So most people try to eat healthy, right? So how can you make it kind of healthier? So you don't put another piece of bread on top. Then what you do, you take a little bit of butter, put butter or olive oil. If you want to be a little bit healthy, you can do olive oil. It tastes just as good. Sprinkle a little bit of olive oil, put the bread on a pan in the olive oil, put the cheese on top. Cook it for a little while. You take that bitch, you flip it over. Then you may say to yourself, what kind of animal cooks cheese directly on a skillet? Here's the thing. If you guys have never done this, it tastes amazing. The cheese itself being cooked tastes so much better than melted cheese. Like, have y'all ever had like halloumi, for example? Like, it gets like crispy. It's like, you know, when you get a pizza that has the cheese on the crust that gets like crispy, it turns into that. It actually tastes better without the second slice of bread. Then you dress that up a little bit. Take a little bit of arugula or a little bit of spinach, chop it up a little bit, take a little bit of tomato, chop that up, get some fresh raw onion, give it a little bit of kick, chop that up, sprinkle that crap on top, drizzle with a little bit of hot sauce, and you're done. And you're like, wait a minute, but that ain't a grilled cheese. It actually tastes better. Like, it tastes better and it's healthier. Like, y'all get that? It's it's like it tastes better and it's healthier. And the other thing is that it doesn't even take that long. It's not because normally with a grilled cheese, you know, it's sitting there for 5 minutes. While it's on the grill, you can chop up some stuff. And when I'm talking about chopping spinach, for example, what I'm saying is I'll grab a handful of spinach, just like smack it with your knife a couple of times. It takes like less than 30 seconds to chop. Slice up a little bit of tomato. Onion, maybe a little bit much. You don't even have to do that. Y'all with me? Yeah, it ain't a grilled cheese. This is correct. S. Junior, you are correct. So you should saying I always burn grilled cheese sandwiches. Tip if you burn your grilled cheese sandwich. Grilled cheese sandwiches get burnt because of impatience. The desire to eat, here's the most profound thing you'll ever learn from Dr. K. This is what I learned after 7 years of studying to become a monk. It is the impatience, it is the desire for the grilled cheese that burns the grilled cheese. In order to make the grilled cheese to perfection and enjoy it properly, you have to let go the desire of eating it and let it cook on its own. Don't force it to cook. It is in the things that we try to force in life where we ruin them. Put it on there and detach. Low heat, low and slow, baby. Because the second you crank that heat up, it's not the way it was meant to be made. You have to let that heat go low. It has to transmit through the bread into the cheese and let that melt. It's a delicate balance, the finest of meditations. To crisp up the bread just enough without burning it while letting that heat transmit through. To let go of the desire of the grilled cheese, detach from it. And in detaching from the need to eat the grilled cheese, you shall find yourself with the best grilled cheese. Puka Schnuck was around last night. All right. Shall we do something productive? Sandwich guru? Far from it. Okay, let's do another one. Okay. So one thing that I want to say, you know, a lot of times this kind of stuff, if we're talking about, you know, how do I stop daydreaming? How do I let go of things? How do I focus on the present? How can I get positive reinforcement for my small wins? Some of this stuff is hard to do on your own, okay? So this is the reason that we have a coaching program, is to help y'all with things like this. So if you're someone who's stuck in this kind of cycle of daydreaming, not being able to move forward, being stuck in fantasy, and you're really focused on something like motivation, right? And understanding the way that your mind works, I definitely recommend working with a coach. If you get to the point where you're super depressed or you have something like an anxiety disorder or something like that, I think that's more appropriate for a therapist. But this kind of case of someone who really struggles with motivation, can find it for moments, and then needs to work on building on that foundation, is really what we emphasize in coaching. Just wanted to kind of toss that out there. Okay, let's talk about this next. This is wild. So, girlfriend keeps giving me crap for cheating on her in her dreams. My girlfriend has been dreaming a lot about me cheating on her or treating her badly in her dreams. This has happened around 7 times already, and I keep on waking up to her angry messages about how I treat her in her dreams. I always apologized for it, even though I did nothing wrong, and have made sure to assure her that I would never do those things in real life. But today was the last straw. I woke up to her being very pissed at me, and I decided that I would not apologize this time because it's honestly not my fault. And I've done all I can to assure her. Now she wants to break up because I was being too aggressive towards her and her insecurities. So this sounds kind of frustrating. So this is where, we can go a couple different routes. So let's kind of start with the relationship route. If you're having an argument with someone who has a belief that you think is unreasonable, like you cheated on me in my dreams, therefore you need to apologize. I think a good way to have that conversation is to ask open-ended questions about, help me understand what I need to apologize for. Well, you cheated on me in my dream. You'd ask questions like, am I responsible for the behavior that your mind, is that me? Like, is that actually me? And like, can I control what I do in your dreams? You just ask simple questions like that. Like, I would really start with just open-ended questions. Like, help me understand what I did that was wrong. And that's where sometimes you can, sort of disagree that, like, I don't know how to control my behavior in your dreams. Like, I don't know how to do that. Right? And this is the kind of thing where you've got to be careful, because when you first started apologizing for it, you sort of took responsibility for it, right? Does that make sense? It's kind of weird. But like when you say like, oh yeah, I'm sorry for things that are outside of my control, you set up a expectation for the future. So this is where we've got to be really careful in relationships about what kinds of behaviors we reinforce. Because if you apologize for it 5 times, then it's sort of like understandable why someone may get upset, because you've set an expectation. Both of y'all have agreed that this is your fault, and you've said okay a few times. Right? So there's like that whole angle of the relationship stuff. But what I really want to focus on today is the dreaming part, right? So then like this sort of question of like, why does the girlfriend keep dreaming about this person cheating on them? And so like, what's going on with dreams? Like, what do we know about dreams? So I'd love to talk to y'all today a little bit about dreams and what we know about dreams, and also what we don't know about dreams. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about, I'm just going to share my experience in learning about dreams and sort of different perspectives that I have. We're going to touch a little bit on sort of like hard science. We're going to touch a little bit more on like soft science and different theories. We're going to touch a little bit on psychotherapy and a little bit on spirituality. So the first thing to understand about dreams, we're going to start with science. The first thing to understand about dreams is that we don't really know what they are, and we don't really have great ways of studying them. So what do I mean by that? So if we think about neuroscience, a lot of what we know about neuroscience is originally developed through animal models, okay? So what we'll sort of do is, if we want to figure out like how a neuron works, for example, the earliest studies on neurons used, I believe, squid neurons. So squid neurons are like super, super long. And so they're quite large as well. So like we will study like the brain through animals, right? So if we want to understand how the occipital lobe, how the eyes work, how the visual cortex works, we'll sort of like study animals. Because in the case of an animal, you can actually like dissect the animal, you can look at the brain, you can do kinds of invasive research on animals that we can learn things about scientifically. The challenge with dreams is that we don't have a clear way of like inferring what the animal's dreams are, right? So we can sort of measure visual stimuli in animals. We can measure things like, fear responses. We can measure rudimentary functions of the brain. But when it comes to something as nuanced as a dream, we can't really ask animals like what they're dreaming about. So that's like, there's kind of a disconnect there, because some of the major tools that we use to learn about stuff neuroscientifically, we can't really use animals very well to study dreams. So what we're left with is humans. And the problem with humans is we can ask them, okay, what did you dream about? So we can actually get that kind of data. We can get the subjective data from humans. The problem is that we can't get the objective data from humans. So studies like fMRI, which study blood flow to different parts of the brain, EEG, electroencephalogram, which study electrical activity across the brain, these tend to be imprecise neuroscientific tools. So we can't open up someone's brain and sort of like operate on that minute level, right? Where we can sort of do that with animals. So the first thing to understand about research into dreams is that we're sort of fundamentally handicapped in a way that we're not with many other parts of studying the brain or other phenomenon that are neurological in nature. That being said, we can do some kinds of research, and so we'll share with you kind of what we know about dreams. The first thing is that no one has been able to figure out why we dream from a scientific basis. So we don't really know exactly what purpose they serve. There are case reports of people, for example, who have injuries, who stop being able to dream, and they seem to be doing okay for the most part. Once again, they had brain damage, so it's hard to tell exactly what's caused by what. But no one really knows exactly why we dream. Second thing that we sort of know is, this is really interesting, is that your dreams are based in your experiences in real life in some way. So for example, if you take a blind person, when they dream, they're not able to see. So their dreams, they can still dream, but their dreams are composed of smells, touches, tastes, sounds. So if you lack a particular sense and your brain has never sort of experienced a particular sense, you can't dream in that sense. It's kind of interesting, right? Next thing that we know about dream is that the most common subjective experience in dreams is that most dreams tend to be filled with some kind of emotional content. So the most common emotion that people experience in dreams is anxiety. Negative emotions tend to be more common than positive emotions, but people can feel a full range of emotions. And then we also know from like phenomenologic studies that dreams tend to be kind of bizarre and exaggerated. So they tend to be like pieces of reality that get stitched together in nonsensical ways and amplified. So it's like, you know, I'm at the circus and the president of the United States is there, and the president transformed into an airplane, and then everyone in the circus formed a big tall tower of people, and we stood on top of the airplane, and the airplane flew into the ocean. Like that's like it's like nonsensical. It's all pieces of something that could be plausible that are kind of stitched together. But there does appear to be kind of emotional content, which is very central to dreams. A couple of other things which people tend to wonder about. So about 8 to 10% of dreams tend to have sexual content. So most dreams are not sexual in nature. Sometimes you can get, vivid sexual experiences within dreams. That tends to happen more rarely. But it's not like dreams are all sexual in nature. So we have some data on that kind of stuff. So the short answer is we don't really know, what dreams are. We know that they tend to be filled with emotional content. We know that they tend to be restricted to senses which you're capable of experiencing, and they tend to get stitched together in different ways. So the next thing that people are kind of curious about is like, do dreams mean something? Okay. I don't know if that makes sense, but these are like basically like, if I have a dream, does it mean something, right? Is this my brain trying to tell me that something is going on? So let's kind of take a look at that for a second. So there are a couple of different theories, and what I'm going to do is kind of run through them. So the first is that dreams, and then we'll get to like Freud and all that good stuff, which I'm sure you guys are curious about. Oh, there, okay. So let's think through the possibilities. The first is that dreams are RNG, okay? So there's no meaning to anything in the dream. It's just kind of random. So one way to kind of think about this is, there are different forms of divination, like looking at chicken entrails or like reading tea leaves and things like that. And if you kind of like look at the tea leaves at the bottom of your cup, it can look like something, right? It can look like a dog, or it can look like a wolf, or it can look like a butterfly or whatever. The human mind, it's just a random assortment of stuff, and it doesn't actually have some kind of meaning. And the meaning that we see in dreams is assigned by our mind as opposed to having some kind of intrinsic meaning. So in this kind of hypothesis, what we sort of say is that, okay, the brain just does different kind of stuff. Cleans out adenosine, remakes ATP, neurons kind of like go through some kind of maintenance process. And as a side effect of maintenance, we get these kinds of different, stimuli. And that's what a dream is. And it has no significance whatsoever. So second option is that they do have some kind of meaning. So this is where people like Freud come in. So what Freud basically said is he's like, we've got this subconscious mind, right? That was Freud's biggest contribution. And I know that Freud tends to get, people talk about things like his stages of development, like oral phase, anal phase, phallic phase, all this kind of stuff, Oedipal complex, like all his sexual stuff tends to get memed on the most. But the biggest contribution he made to Western psychology was he was basically the first person in the West who was like, hey, our mind is not all conscious. There's this thing called the subconscious mind. And the thing is, that belief has become so prevalent in our society that we sort of take it as granted. We don't even credit it to Freud anymore. People are just like, oh, it's the subconscious. So what Freud sort of said is we have the conscious mind, but then we also have the subconscious mind, and we have the conscious mind. And basically what happens is the conscious mind suppresses the subconscious mind. So Anna Freud later explored this concept as defense mechanisms, right? So these kinds of things like denial, intellectualization. We have all these defense mechanisms where there's this stuff floating around in our subconscious that our conscious keeps in check. And so the key thing about the dream is that during sleep, the conscious mind becomes inactive, and therefore none of the defense mechanisms are active. So what dreams actually are subconscious. It's like unfiltered subconscious thought. So it absolutely has meaning. Okay? It's basically our subconscious without the restraints of our conscious mind. Subconscious gone wild. And then Jung's also sort of agreed with this. So Jung kind of said like, yeah, it's like the subconscious, but then there were a couple of different important distinctions. One is that Freud thought that our subconscious thoughts are symbolic. So what this sort of means, and other people will sort of say that they're thematic. So what's the difference between these? So a symbolic representation is something that means something else. Whereas a thematic representation is it's not like precisely correct, but the theme is actually the same. It's more direct. So even if in a dream I'm afraid of being, hunted down by a bear, what Freud may say is that a bear is a symbol for my father. Whereas what I may be afraid, a thematic person may say that I'm afraid of being prey, but it's not like the bear is a symbol for something. It's the fear that's important. Like I'm afraid that someone is going to take advantage of me. Versus Freud will say like, oh, like the bear means something else. Does that make sense? So a good example of this is like, so some people will say that losing your teeth in a dream is a symbol for a fear of death. So losing teeth equals fear of death. So they're symbolic representations. Whereas in a thematic representation, losing teeth may be like, oh crap, I forgot to floss. And I'm worried about dental hygiene. So it's not really a one-to-one representation like the real world, but it's basically like in the same ballpark. Whereas in the symbolic representation of dreams, there's sort of like this idea that it actually means something else. Now, I tend to be more of the mind of the thematic representation. I don't really consider, there's some value to this sort of symbolic representation stuff, but there are a couple of like problems with the symbolic representations. One is, as some critics have kind of pointed out, like symbols are not the same for all people. So some people will believe that symbolism is like universally human. So there's some symbols that are universally human. I don't know, for example, that like someone who grows up in Papua New Guinea, that losing teeth has the fear of death, right? I don't know that that's the case. I just haven't seen evidence that has made me convinced that symbolic representations are universally human. Which then sort of begs the question, okay, so like if they're not universally human, then what? Even if individuals can have symbolic representations, you can't read a book about symbols and then have this mean the same thing for every person. So then like understanding the objective nature of symbols within dreams, I don't think really translates to much personally. Some people do believe that. So they believe that I can read a book about symbolic representations and this is what this means for all human beings. That all human beings think that losing teeth is a fear of mortality. And they believe that, and that's fine. Like they're allowed to do that, right? So this is kind of where, second kind of perspective is that it's actually subconscious thought. And then the third thing to kind of consider is that there's some amount of housekeeping. So that dreams serve the function of basically some kind of like mental housekeeping. So if there are, fears or thoughts that I didn't take care of while conscious, that I can take care of these in the dream. Sometimes there are different kinds of like, so we know that like memory consolidation happens while we sleep. And so the process of consolidating our memories may result in some kind of dream-like stimulus, right? So if I spent the day at the theme park and was riding, if I was riding roller coasters and I had a really great day and I enjoyed it a lot, and like my brain at night is like, okay, let's like save that to long-term storage. And in the process of saving that to long-term storage, as I'm like, rewriting that kind of stuff, like I experience some kind of roller coaster-ish sort of dream where it's some sort of like reinterpretation of that stimuli. So as part of kind of the natural process of what we do when we sleep, like how our mind handles thoughts, emotions, experiences, some of that process involves or manifests as dreaming. So whether it's memory consolidation or experiences throughout the day that weren't processed appropriately, they sort of get their time to kind of go on in our head. Now, you may say, like, does that mean it's part of the subconscious mind? There's some overlap here. It's not necessarily like these are all exclusive. But I think the big difference is that, this is a kind of a short-term thing where it's like if I did something on day one, I will dream about it on night one or maybe night two. Whereas if you look at Freud and Jung and stuff, they sort of think that, okay, we've got this subconscious, which maybe changes over time, but is generally static. And on, night 263, we can have a dream about this. On night 864, we can have a dream about this. On night 22, we can have a dream about this. Does that kind of make sense? Oh, I guess y'all can't see that, but so that's like kind of how those are different. All right, so this is sort of like a daily housekeeping sort of thing, okay? So these are a couple of perspectives about what dreams are. Next thing to consider is kind of like spiritual perspectives. Actually, let's talk about psychotherapy for a second. So when it comes to dreams, oftentimes we'll use these as tools in psychotherapy. So in some disciplines of psychotherapy, dreams are way more important than others. So number one is psychoanalysis. So psychoanalysis, you can easily argue is actually a precursor to psychotherapy and doesn't fall under the umbrella of psychotherapy. You can say that it's actually completely different and that psychotherapy is an offshoot of psychoanalysis. Fair enough to say. But in psychoanalysis, so people like Freud and Jung, so people who become Freudian psychoanalysts and Jungian psychoanalysts will do a lot of work around dreams, okay? So that's very common. At the same time, we don't really have great evidence that this is particularly useful. I'm not saying that it isn't useful. I'm just saying we don't have great studies on it. We may have some studies on it, but hey.
Hi.
What's up?
Can I give you a little feedback?
Yeah.
Seems kind of dry. Can you just, hang out and chat for a little bit?
Nope, I'm going to finish my lecture even if it seems dry.
No, just hang out and chat.
Nope, I'm finishing my lecture on psychoanalysis of dreams.
So boring.
Okay. If it's boring, too bad. We're almost done.
Can you just save it for the book, though?
What?
Save it for a book.
Nope, we're talking about dreams today. Look, if you guys want to know about dreams, we're going to learn about dreams. And it doesn't, I don't know, like this is, It is what it is. Okay. So I guess she's bored with it. So in psychoanalysis, people will do all these like complex dream interpretations, stuff like that. Freud wrote a book called The Interpretation of Dreams. The interesting thing is that the more that we kind of evolve psychotherapy, like the less symbolic and weird stuff kind of gets. So there's even like CBT versions of dream interpretation. And I think this is where the kind of stuff that like I like about dreams. So when I talk about dreams in psychotherapy, what I tend to focus on is if someone has a dream. So here's how I deal with dreams, okay? So let's say you've got a dream. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll ask someone, okay, so like tell me about the dream. And so that they'll say, okay, this happened first, 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 this happened first. Next, okay? So there are like 6 events that happen in the dream that they can remember. And then like, so what an analyst may do is they may look at this and they'll say like, okay, so, and I'm probably not doing this justice. If you're an analyst out there and you can explain this better, please post it on our subreddit. We'd really appreciate that. But they'll say, oh, this means like fear of death. You know, this, by the way, is like this kind of internal conflict. And they'll kind of translate your dream for you. I personally don't put much stock in that. And what I tend to ask people is for each of these events, what was the emotion that you felt? What was the emotion? What was the emotion? What was the emotion? So as we go through the emotions, then I'll basically ask them, like, is this relevant to real life in some way? Is this relevant to real life in some way? Is this relevant to real life in some way? Basically, this is what I'll do. And I'll try to see, like, if I'm done psychotherapy with them, I may know stuff about them, right? So I'll know, like, oh, like, you know, I know that you've had a lot of conflict with your brother over this particular thing. Wow, that seems like it's a very similar emotion to, like, what you were experiencing then, right? And what we basically do is I think about dreams as almost a projective test. So this is like an inkblot test where we can, it's really in the interpretation of it that you do with a patient that you really figure out like what has value and what doesn't. Because I do think, I personally think that dreams are not completely random. So I don't really subscribe to this. I don't think that, generally speaking, if you look at the body, our body doesn't do anything randomly. So I find it hard to believe that there's just one part of our body that functions completely randomly. Whereas the rest of our body, like everything that happens, it happens for a reason. So there's all kinds of fascinating stuff in the body. Like, for example, our muscles, the muscles in our leg, when they contract, they actually push blood in our veins back up to our heart, right? So if you kind of think about so arteries have a lot of, elasticity to them. Veins have less elasticity to them. Our legs are beneath our heart. I know this is kind of a random non sequitur, but it's like super cool in physiology. So like if we kind of think about it, how do we like pump blood from the bottom of our feet back up to our heart, right? Because it's easy to get blood from our brain to our heart because it just has to go with gravity. Easy to get blood from our arms to our heart because that also sort of has to go with gravity. Easier to get blood from our stomach to our heart because it doesn't have to travel very far. But when you're talking about the blood in your fingers and you're talking about the blood in your toes, that has to go against gravity across a much longer distance. And so our body was like, oh, I have a neat idea. Every time we contract muscles, what we're going to actually do is squeeze the veins and push the blood back to the heart, right? So our body basically does everything for a reason, And so I don't think that dreams are just completely random. I think there's something going on in our mind. And so when I do kind of dream work with patients, we'll sort of use it this way. We'll sort of say like, okay, like what about the dream resonates with you? What do you think in this dream is actually applicable to your real life? And there is evidence that shows that people who do kind of dream work in psychotherapies, there's actually really interesting studies about people who are stuck in psychotherapy. So if you feel stuck in psychotherapy, oftentimes one way to kind of like randomly like get some sort of emotional grip and have some kind of like thing to work on or make some kind of breakthrough can often be done through dreams. Because it's kind of random, right? So you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here? What's going on here? You hit a dead end, then you start doing some dream work, and it can really help in terms of like opening things up for people. So I tend to think about dreams almost as projective tests, where it's sort of like it gives us material to go through in a psychotherapeutic session, okay? So that's kind of like dreams and psychotherapy. There's a lot that's written about this kind of stuff. I found a really good summary, actually. Let me see if I can just post this for y'all. I found a 30-page... Oh, yeah. So this is just... I just Googled this. And there's a... I can't post in chat, but maybe you guys can... The use of dreams in modern psychotherapy. This is a great 30-page summary. It's in the public domain. Not the published version. This is the author's final peer-reviewed manuscript. I think it's in the public domain. I just Googled it. It looks like, okay, that's interesting. So I just Googled psychotherapy and dreams, and this came up. I assumed it was in, yeah, it looks like it's just posted on marquette.edu. So it looks like it's posted for public consumption. So it's just a great, so this is, if y'all are interested in this, I would highly recommend this because it's 36 pages, so it's not like a textbook or something, but she does a really good job of going through like a lot of the common, sort of like summarizes like what Adler said about dreams, what Jung said about dreams in one paragraph. And so it's really good as an introductory thing about like, you know, dreams and psychotherapy. It's actually excellent. Probably the best thing I've read, to be honest. And I've tried to study this stuff a lot. It's just a lot of it is very like obtuse and dense. So that's dream analysis can be useful in psychotherapy. Some psychotherapists will work a lot with dreams, and other psychotherapists won't work so much. I think what we've tended to see is over time people have moved away from this, especially with the advent of the third wave of psychotherapies like dialectical behavioral therapy and all this mindfulness-oriented stuff. So, yeah, it's useful in psychotherapy. How useful depends on the therapist and depends on your interest as well. Last thing that we're going to talk about is spiritual perspectives. So these, I'm going to focus on Eastern perspectives. I don't feel qualified. It's not like I'm just not knowledgeable enough on like Baha'i Islamic perspectives on dreams. I have not studied those in any formal or informal way. So I'm sure that in the Judeo-Christian system and all these, like, I don't know what Shinto people believe about dreams. I just don't know. I haven't studied it. So I'm going to focus on the karmic religions, Eastern religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, and a couple of different interpretations there. The first thing is that in the yogic system, it's not so much the content of the dream that's important, but an understanding that a dream is a state of consciousness. So a lot of the Eastern perspective is really interested in dreams in terms of like, it's a fundamentally different state of consciousness, okay? So this is kind of interesting. So, the general idea is that we have mind, okay? And then we have the self, or true consciousness. And these are actually separate. And then we have states of mind like waking, dreaming, and sleeping. Okay? And then if y'all have watched Dr. K's Guide to Meditation, you'll see that we have a very long video about states of mind, where we also know that there are other kinds of states of mind, like flow, which is like dhyana. Okay, so this is a state of meditation. So we know that there are other states of mind as well. And so it's kind of interesting. There's a great book that I have called the Panchadashi, and they explain this really well, where they're like, how do we know that sleeping is a state of mind? And they make a very interesting observation, which is that you're aware of sleep, right? So when you wake up in the morning, you have an awareness that you've slept. You have an awareness that you've slept enough. You have an awareness that you've slept too much. You have an awareness that you've slept too little. And so what they sort of concluded is that awareness must be outside of the mind. In order for it to observe and make conclusions about sleep, it has to actually exist outside of the mind. There are actually good physiologic counter arguments to this. So this is something that yogis developed, let's say, 3,000 years ago in ancient India. But since then, we have learned a lot about the body, the brain, the mind, the body and the brain for sure. I don't know if we've really learned a whole lot more about the mind, to be honest. And so there may be other ways that we kind of know this stuff outside of awareness. So one example of this is that, like, you may have physiologic sensors, like sensors of hunger and thirst and solute concentration and glycogen concentration and hormonal imbalances and things like, or hormonal balances that will indicate to you how long you've slept. So it may not be some kind of cosmic awareness, but simply your insulin to glucagon balance, which gives your body a sense of a clock. So you may have like a biological clock where, oh, based on how hungry I am and what my solute concentration is and how much urine I've produced and the balance between glucagon, insulin, and my current glycogen store level, some part of my brain interprets all of that information and says, I've slept for 8 hours. Does that make sense? So I don't know that. I personally agree with this. Like, once you study it, you can kind of make your own determination. So having kind of done all these different also meditations around sleep and awareness and stuff like that, I think this is correct. But it's important to point out that there may be simple physiologic reasons that don't have anything to do with a true self or true consciousness or anything like that. Okay? So that's one perspective, which is that dreams are just a state of mind. A couple of other perspectives. One is that dreams are places that your past karmas can manifest, or your samskars can manifest. So let's look at each of these in turn. Let's start with samskars. So if y'all have been paying attention to us for a while, you'll know what a samskar is. If the concept of a samskar is new to you, you can check out our wiki. I'm sure that we've got YouTube videos about it, but the best explanation of samskars is going to be in the Vedic psychology section of Dr. K's guide, okay? So we have events that happen, and when we have events happen, we have some kind of, so we have an event, okay? When we have an event, we produce an emotion. But the emotion of the event there are two things that can happen to it. One is it gets processed, and one is it gets stored. And oftentimes, depending on the size of the event, more of it will be processed and more of it will be stored. So for example, if I have something super traumatic, if I plan a birthday party for myself and I invite 30 of my friends and I have a bunch of food there, what happens and no one shows up? So I feel super sad. So I feel sad on a level of 10 out of 10. And then what happens is I feel really sad about it. I think about it. I feel resentful for a while. And then eventually, after 2 hours pass and no one shows up, I start playing video games. So after 2 hours, I've processed my emotion to an 8 out of 10. And then once I start playing video games, this gets stored. This goes dormant. And then the next time I see my friends, right, because I haven't fully processed the emotion, I see my friend the next day, and what happens? When I meet my friend, this 8 out of 10 stored emotion comes up and reactivates in my mind. And then I feel super, super sad and angry and resentful. And then my friend is like, wait, what's wrong? What happened? Like, why are you so upset with me? They're super confused because this emotion is not coming from our current interaction, right? It's projected from the past onto the present. So that's the idea of a samskar. And so one way that a samskar can be metabolized and processed or brought back up is through our dreams. That's one Eastern perspective. The other thing to think about in terms of a karmic perspective is that when we commit an action, we get some kind of consequence. There's a principle of cause and effect. And so it's kind of like if I have a neutron and I create a positron, I have to create an electron as well, right? There's no way that I can just create a positron. That any kind of action I take has to have some kind of reaction to it. It's the principle of karma, very similar to physics, basically. The only difference really is that the principle of karma assumes that this principle of every action has an equal and opposite reaction applies to more than just physics. So like on any level of stuff, like this all applies. Or you could sort of say that, physics begets chemistry, chemistry begets biochemistry, biochemistry begets biology, biology begets physiology, physiology begets life, life has a brain, brains create psychology, psychology creates behavioral economics, behavioral economics creates economics, psychology also on a mass scale creates sociology. So at the end of everything, like the root of everything is still physics and is still this principle of cause and effect, if that kind of makes sense. Okay? So what this sort of posits is that, when you take an action, there's some kind of karmic debt to be paid. And one of the interesting explorations that I made was I was sort of thinking about the suffering in dreams. So I did a particular meditation technique that allows you to be aware in dreams. It's a very hard technique to do. If you guys want to learn it today, I can teach it to you today, but it's going to be really hard. So I had to practice this technique for months, and that's on top of, being a regular meditator for like years. So it's an advanced technique of meditation. And so what I did when I was doing this technique is I observed the suffering that I experienced. And what I made an interesting observation that in the dream and in real life, the quality of emotion is actually the same. If you really think about your dreams, the fear that you feel in your dreams is like 100% the same. And what I realize is like in my dreams, I'm actually like, so I sometimes will have negative dreams. And, as we mentioned before, anxiety is the most common emotion that is represented in dreams. Negative emotions tend to be more common than positive emotions. And all the negativity that I experience in dreams is like feels 100% real. Like I'm so terrified. You'll wake up in a cold sweat and just terrified, terrified, terrified. So I was kind of wondering, what does that mean karmically? So if I have some amount of like suffering or negative emotion that I've karmically signed up for in life, do I sort of get rid of it by paying these like phantom dollars from the dreams? Do I pay this karmic debt in a dream? It seems to me like that makes sense based on my personal experiences, but I'm not saying that that is objectively correct. So that's kind of a prevailing theory that I still kind of think about to this day. And so that's kind of a spiritual perspective on dreams. Right? So what is a dream? We don't know. That is the best answer. That is the answer that I feel the most confident in. Okay? I don't know. I don't know what a dream is. Next thing to consider is, okay, so like if we don't know what a dream really is, what do we know? So we've tried to study dreams scientifically. It turns out that they're actually really hard to study because generally speaking, dreams, we study the brain, right? And when it comes to the brain, we have two major things that we need. One is we need invasive methods because things like EEG and fMRI are not sufficient. So it's not like one part of the brain dreams. So dreams are not necessarily neuroanatomically bound, right? So it's not like we have the dream center of the brain. So since tools like fMRI and EEG aren't specific enough, what we would normally need to do is more invasive methods. And generally speaking, when we use invasive methods, we use them on animals because we don't do that kind of research on people. The problem with doing invasive research on animals is that animals can't tell us anything about their dreams. So it's very hard to correlate the invasive scientific information with anything subjective from a dream. So we're kind of handicapped in that way in our scientific exploration of dreams, which is actually a really fascinating subject that I could give an entire lecture about. Really cool. That being said, we've figured a couple things out, right? So what we have done is we've done a lot of qualitative research where we'll ask people, what are you dreaming about? What have we learned? Really interesting stuff. First is that blind people can't see in their dreams. So if you don't have some kind of experience, you can't dream about it. So it seems like dreams are composites of our own waking experiences. Okay? Next thing to consider is that oftentimes dreams are emotional. They tend to be, the most common emotion in dreams is anxiety. Negative emotions tend to be more common than positive emotions. 8 to 10% of dreams tend to be sexual in nature. Why do we include that? Because people just wonder about that. Everyone wants to know about sexuality in dreams, so that's what we know, okay? And we're not really sure what purpose they serve, okay? So one hypothesis is that dreams are just completely RNG. They're byproducts or side effects of whatever restorative processes go on during sleep. I personally don't put a whole lot of stock into that hypothesis because, as I mentioned before, basically nothing in our body is random. Like everything, evolution has evolved a purpose for everything. We also do know that animals dream, and I don't know if y'all have a pet, but I used to have pet dogs, and watching them dream is fascinating. You can tell that they're dreaming. And so we also know, for example, that children dream, and children dream very, very vividly. So chances are it's doing something for them. So what are some of the things that it could be doing? What are some of the other purposes of dreams? So people like Freud and Jung sort of hypothesize that we've got a subconscious and we've got a conscious. So our subconscious has all kinds of thoughts. And generally speaking, those are kept in check by our conscious mind. And so the dreaming state is the one state where the subconscious gets to throw a party without the conscious mind, being around. So parents aren't home, time to throw a rager, which is what a dream is. There's also a perspective that dreams are symbolic in nature, which is that, the thing in the dream isn't actually what it means, but it's a symbol for something else. Or dreams are thematic in nature, where it's not so much that it's a symbol, it's not a representation of something else, but that generally is applicable. It's just some of the details are changed. So if I'm afraid of abandonment, that may manifest in a dream with me being left behind at a circus. But the fear of abandonment is consistent. So there's a thematic connection between my actual fears and the fears in the dream versus a symbolic connection, which is me being abandoned at the circus is actually a symbol of, I don't know, becoming the process of becoming independent as an adult. Who knows? It's a symbol. So it's not actually connected. It's just one thing means something else, okay? I tend to put stock more into sort of the thematic experience. Another option is that dreams are just housekeeping in some way in terms of memory consolidation, processing emotions, things like that. That's not mutually exclusive with sort of the Freudian, Jungian subconscious perspective. Just another thing to consider. Dreams are used in psychotherapy. Generally speaking, if you want hardcore dream analysis with a lot of symbolic interpretation, go see a psychoanalyst. They're the ones who train in that the best. Although regular psychotherapists will also use dreams, I sometimes use dreams to draw out emotional themes that may be relevant to patients. There are some studies that show that working on dreams can be useful if you're stuck in psychotherapy. Last thing to consider is sort of a spiritual perspective. So one is in the Eastern perspective, we kind of look at dreams. We're not really interested. I don't know if this sort of makes sense, but in the yogic perspective, they're not really interested in the content of mind. What they're really interested in is transcending mind entirely. And so if that's the goal, they sort of view dreams as a state of consciousness, and that's really the most important thing. It's just a different state of consciousness. The goal is still to move past all of that. So we don't want to tunnel down into what your anxiety is. We don't want to tunnel down into what your dream is. The goal is transcending mind entirely. Other perspectives from kind of the Eastern traditions is that dreams may have some connection to past lives, karmic manifestations, and then from a Vedic psychology perspective, this pent-up emotion can kind of manifest in dreams. So here's kind of a quick overview right, of dreams. I'm not saying once again that this is necessarily correct, but it's something that I've been super curious about and something that, I thought I'd share today because people in our community have been asking about dreams for like years. If you guys want a meditation technique, I can teach y'all a meditation real quick to become aware in dreams. So there's a preparatory technique to this, which is catch the moment between inhalation and exhalation. So as you're breathing in, there's a moment where your inhalation becomes an exhalation. So if you breathe normally, what you'll kind of feel is there's this like hump at the top. And so what you want to do is zoom into that hump, right? So if we kind of have this like hump at the top, we kind of zoom in and there's a hump there, and you zoom in and there's a hump there. So kind of find the moment where inhalation becomes exhalation. Now, this is not a technique you should do by holding your breath. So holding your breath is different because we don't go throughout our day holding our breath, right? Normally, inhalation naturally flows into exhalation. So what you need to do is catch the moment where inhalation becomes exhalation. Next thing you do, so try this technique for a week, spend about 15 to 20 minutes trying to catch them every day for about 1 week, maybe 2, to try to catch the moment where inhalation becomes exhalation. It's not so important that you actually catch the moment. What's important is that you train looking for the moment, okay? Then you can do this technique on dreams, which is catch the moment of sleep. So when I lay down and I go to bed, I'm awake, boom, I'm asleep. And then boom, I'm awake again. So what you want to do is just notice your mind falling asleep. Notice it falling asleep. Notice it falling asleep. Notice it falling asleep. And catch the moment of sleep. Notice it and see to yourself, here comes sleep, here comes sleep, here comes sleep. Here it is. Now I'm asleep. Right? And as you practice that technique, what that will do is help you train your awareness to stay intact through the transition of sleep. Does that make sense? And then once you have the ability to hold on to your awareness through sleep, then you will be able to study the nature of dreams, because then you'll be able to be aware. Sounds terrifying? Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. Is that really possible? Yes, but it's difficult. Is it different to catch the moment where exhalation becomes inhalation? Yes. Tech Teller, good question, and also you should know this, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with Kumbhak and Rechak, but Kumbhak and Rechak are different. They ain't the same. Have I done it? Yeah, that's why I'm teaching it. Because it's great. I love it. So I was asking, that's a more esoteric concept. So just to explain it to people. So Tech Teller was asking, if I find the moment where inhalation becomes exhalation, is that different from the moment that exhalation becomes inhalation? The answer is absolutely yes. Right? And the reason for that, or not the reason, but one thing in support of that, is in yogic breathing techniques, there is one practice called Kumbhak, which means breath retention, and Rechak, which also means breath retention, or not really breath retention. So both of those get translated as holding your breath. What does holding your breath mean? Holding your breath means not breathing. But there are 2 ways you can hold your breath. You can hold your breath after an inhalation, or you can hold your breath after an exhalation. And those are 2 different things. So even though there's an absence of breathing, whether the absence of breathing has full breath or no breath is very different. So one thing about dreams, by the way, So a lot of times the stuff that we cover on stream is related to what we do in coaching. So if you're struggling with like motivation, if you're struggling with like putting together a to-do list, if you're struggling with, working towards your goals on a day-to-day basis, if you want to understand why you can't practice self-compassion, if you want to understand why you beat yourself up or lose your motivation despite making progress, all of that stuff is great for coaching. If y'all are interested in interpretation and analysis of dreams, do not sign up for coaching. This is not something we do in coaching. If y'all want that kind of stuff, you really need to go see a therapist or an analyst or maybe someone who's like a mystic or something like that. But to be very clear, do not sign up for coaching if you're interested in like interpretation of dreams. We don't teach it to our coaches. We don't expect them to know this kind of stuff. So our coaching program was developed based on basically evidence-based, scientifically valid interventions is most of it. But then we added on a lot of stuff relating to like Eastern perspectives, like Vedic psychology. So there haven't been studies that have verified that Vedic psychology is correct. At the same time, I felt very, very confident in teaching this stuff because I've used it clinically myself in a clinical setting. But part of what I like about Vedic psychology is that it was developed, it's a system of psychology that was developed outside of pathology. So the interesting thing about, if you think about therapy, right, is a lot of the psychology that we learn as therapists has this backdrop of we're treating people who are ill in some way, right? So that's not necessarily true, but that is certainly an emphasis. So if you look at like cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So if you learn CBT, like there's a therapy in there. So these techniques were designed and sort of formulated to help someone who is ill, like with depression. Now you can use therapy for non-therapeutic purposes, but what we teach our coaches is sort of designed for non-therapeutic purposes, right? So it's designed for some of these core aspects of like human psychology. Like, so how do you understand a person? And when that person tries to do something, what actually gets in the way? It's usually not an external circumstance. It's usually an internal thing. So we'll teach about resistance, for example. We'll teach about ego or ahamkar, because a lot of what holds us back is actually our own ego, right? So like, oh, the reason I don't go to the gym is because I would look like an idiot. And so it's that fear of looking like an idiot, which is all about your identity. It's because I don't want to look like an idiot. So how do you get past that? Because if you can get past that, then you can actually go to the gym. So this is why we use some of these techniques like Vedic psychology, but to be crystal clear, if you're interested in the dream stuff, like if you loved this lecture and you're like, man, I really want to learn about this, don't sign up for coaching. If you're interested in learning about your ego and how it interferes with you sort of accomplishing your goals and why you can't do stuff, then sign up for coaching. Does that make sense? So we sometimes cover stuff on stream that is not like related to coaching at all. Couple questions. Yeah, no dream coaches. Yeah, so like, I mean, as cool as that would be, I just don't feel... So our coaching program has also been like rigorously studied. We recently presented our findings at the American Psychiatric Association National Conference. So like, I'm confident in what we do there because like we've also like tested it and it works, but like, I'm not confident in the dream stuff. Does that make sense? So people are asking about lucid dreaming. I'm not sure exactly about lucid dreaming because I've never learned lucid dreaming, so I don't really know much about it. So I'm not sure. So I also have not seen a consistent technique that succeeds with lucid dreaming. So I'm somewhat skeptical of the practice to begin with, but you know, I just haven't seen a whole lot of like data that makes me confident in it in terms of its reliability. No, my technique was not for lucid dreaming. Isn't the big deal about lucid dreaming that you control your dreams? Like, can't you direct them and stuff? Peacock Lover is asking, should I use incense for meditation? You can. So here's the other thing to remember. If you use incense for meditation, it can absolutely be helpful, provided you don't use it for anything else. So if you want to set up, so just like kind of a bedtime routine, you can set up a meditation routine. So you can do something like listen to particular tracks of music, do some light yoga, light some incense. And I use incense for meditation because if I don't feel like meditating, there's a particular kind of incense that I use for meditation. And all I have to do, I don't have to have the willpower to meditate for 20 minutes. All I have to do is have the willpower to light the incense. And then the smell of the incense makes me want to meditate. Yeah, so people are talking about, like, was that a technique around lucid dreaming? I've taught mindfulness techniques that go hand in hand with lucid dreaming in the that may be. I'm not. I just don't know. So the techniques that I teach are generally speaking from the yogic tradition for the most part, right? Or tantric tradition sometimes, but from the Eastern religious tradition, spiritual tradition, maybe is a better word. So the technique that I taught is a technique to be aware in dreams. Now, if that is lucid dreaming, then I guess it's a technique for lucid dreaming. That's not the way that I was taught. And if it overlaps, that may be. I just don't know enough about lucid dreaming to say this is a lucid dreaming thing. I use sukar dhup, which is a sandalwood dhup. I don't know what a dhup is. It's not like an incense stick. It's like an incense. It's like a chubby. So I'll have the way I taught you forbidden jutsu. Problem is everyone wants the forbidden jutsus, but what y'all don't understand is you can't even do the forbidden jutsu. Like, you got to do the basic jutsu before you do the forbidden jutsu. Do you know why it's impossible to run fast in dreams? I don't know. Is it impossible? I just taught it to you. Go do it. The whole point, like, it's, like, you got to do the basic meditation first. Like, that's the reason for that. Like, even if I were to teach some kind of, like, special mantra on stream, I don't think that the people who would use it, it would work for them, because you have to attain a certain state of consciousness for the mantra to work. Like, it's not thought. You have to be in a state of consciousness, not a state of mind. It's kind of like you have to cultivate something that's beyond the flow state for a mantra to really start working. No, it's look, so using a gaming analogy, it's like, I can give you some endgame I can give you the, what is it, Sword of Night and Flame at level 1. Like, you can be level 1, I can give you the Sword of Night and Flame. You're still not going to be able to use it. You can't even equip the damn thing. Right? So advanced techniques require, like, advanced stats to use. That's just how it works. And the other thing, so Elden Ring is actually a great example of this. The other thing is that you can beat the game with the Sword of Night and Flame, and you can beat the game with the Humble Longsword. That's very true of meditation as well. It's all about your usage of it. It's not, like, I think actually Elden, now that I think about it, is the best analogy for, like, meditation. Which is, it's all about your skill with the thing. And it's not like using a better thing may make it a little bit easier, but it's all about the way that you use it. We don't sell any physical products for mental health that I can think of. I mean, we have a merch store. So we've looked at, like, selling things like weighted blankets and stuff. But, we'd really want those things to be, how can I say this? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff we could sell. It's just, we'd want to be sure that it actually helps people. Sell your crystals. T-shirts don't enhance your meditation. If you guys want to get a t-shirt, get a t-shirt, but the t-shirt isn't going to help your meditation. It's not going to make you better at video games. Yeah, I mean, we may have maybe the only thing that we could, I don't know if we actually sell this, but yeah. So we've talked a little bit about, I think it'd be cool if we could actually like source some high quality prayer beads and things like that, like actual meditation related merch. But that too, I'm very particular about selling prayer beads. So when I used to give out prayer beads to people like my patients and stuff, I would get them sourced from like monasteries in India where they were like hand assembled by monks. So I don't know that we can do that in today's day and age. Okay. And I'm upsetting Kruti because I'm talking about merch. Okay. It's time for me to bow out, chat, before I get in more trouble. Yeah, we were planning on selling yoga mats, but I think we couldn't find some that were of appropriate quality. Right? Like we want our merch to like be pretty good if we can. So what about cheating in dreams? Cheating in dreams is more about the dreamer than it is about the person who's guilty in the dream. Okay. Who are we rating, chat? So a couple things before we head out for the day. So just a reminder that our Touch Grass campaign is actually going on Discord right now. So this is for those of you that are also looking for like some kind of support or like want to get some sort of accountability or want to like get some kind of scheduling going on. We've got a lot of cool stuff going on Discord. May was meditation month. Touch Grass, I think, is already ongoing. So this is a campaign to help y'all, like, basically, I think it's like a picture contest of some kind. And we're encouraging people to, like, go out and do things. And so if y'all are interested in, like, joining us, going out and doing things, by joining us, I mean, like, virtually. So, like, people will be posting and stuff like that. Then definitely check that out. There's a lot of cool stuff that goes on the Discord. People will get together and they'll chill, they'll play games, they'll study, they'll do all that kind of stuff. Do stuff, win points, and get prizes, as Danana says. So check that out if y'all are interested. And there's a random winner and there's a number one winner. And some of our adventures are also on Instagram, so y'all can check that out too. And let's go ahead and raid. Who we rating? Raid channel. Okay, who? Willie Shahan. Okay, we're gonna read Will Shahan. Oh, raid Alvius. Okay, we're gonna raid Alvius Sanctuary. Cool. All right, chat. We'll see y'all on Friday, okay? Bump, bump, bump. Take care, everybody.